Ladies and gentlemen, the Canadian Armed Force Guard will now march on, accompanied by the Royal Canadian Air Force Centennial Band. Mesdames et messieurs, la garde de cérémonie des Forces armées canadiennes va maintenant défiler, accompagnée par la musique du centenaire de l'aviation royale canadienne.
Attention! Parade will march to the Juno Beach Center in Calmaroot. By the left! Quick! March! Advance. Move! Turn!
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our dignitaries. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez accueillir nos distingués invités. The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. Le très honorable Justin Trudeau, Premier ministre du Canada. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Son Altesse...
Open order! March! Front right! Steady! Center right! Steady! Rear right! Steady!
Guard! Stand at ease! Stand easy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our dignitaries. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez accueillir nos distingués invités. The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. Le très honorable Justin Trudeau, Premier ministre du Canada. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Son Altesse Royale, le Prince de Galles. The Prime Minister of the Republic of France, Gabriel Attal. Le Premier ministre de la République française, Gabriel Attal. Please rise for the royal salute. Veuillez vous lever pour le salut royal.
Parade! Royal salute! Salute! Attention!
I'm from Sherbrooke, Quebec. Sur-Mer. Not Normandy, we did the Buckingham Palace in 2018.
We'll be heading back to the red carpet.
Parade! To the national anthems. Salute!
Arriving from the sea is the CC-130J Hercules transport plane. L'avion que vous voyez arriver est un avion de transport Hercule CC-130J. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated.
Guard.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Order.
veuillez vous asseoir.
Guard. Move to the right. Right. Turn. And left. Quick. March. Guard. Halt.
Distingués invités, chers anciens combattants, Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Turn.
Soyez les bienvenus à la plage Juno pour souligner ensemble le 80e anniversaire du jour J.
East.
Mon nom est Geneviève Paris. Je suis officière des affaires publiques pour les Forces armées canadiennes et je suis honorée de vous accompagner pour cette cérémonie. Distinguished guests, dear veterans, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are here today at Juno Beach to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I am Geneviève Paris, Public Affairs Officer for the Canadian Armed Forces, and I am honored to guide you for this ceremony. Nous avons le privilège d'avoir parmi nous des vétérans du jour J, de la bataille de Normandie et de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. C'est avec respect et admiration qu'ils sont accueillis aujourd'hui. We are honored to have with us veterans of D-Day, the Battle of Normandy, and the Second World War. It is with great respect and admiration that we welcome you today. Et maintenant, M. Morley Littleton, gardien du savoir de la Première Nation Kwajalein en Saskatchewan, au Canada, vous présentera les chants Treaty for Flag Song and the Victory Song. Il sera accompagné par sa fille, Chelsea Machiskinik. Ensemble, ils font partie des cris Spirit Singer. Mr. Morley Littleton is a knowledge keeper from Kwajalein First Nation in Saskatchewan, Canada. He will now perform the Treaty for Our Flag Song and the Victory Song. He will be assisted by his daughter, Shelby Machiskinik, and together they are part of the Cree Spirit Singer.
Soldier boy, don't know my gonna be well.
I would now like to introduce our first act of the ceremony, Morgan Grace and Mitchell McCombs. Morgan Grace is Red River Métis fiddle player from East Selkirk, Manitoba, Canada. Musical talent aside, Morgan Grace has a special connection to Juno Beach, as her great-uncle, Mr. Roddy Monkman, Second World War veteran, traveled to Juno Beach in 2009 as part of the Métis Veterans Delegation. Morgan Grace is accompanied by guitarist Mitchell McCombs. Mitchell is a multi-instrumentist from Brandon, Manitoba, Canada. He has a deep connection to his Ojibwe and Métis roots. Together, they will perform the Teardrop Waltz and the Medicine Line. J'aimerais maintenant présenter notre premier acte de la cérémonie, Morgan Grace and Mitchell McCombs. Morgan Grace est violoniste métisse de la Rivière-Rouge à Selkirk, Manitoba, au Canada. Mis à part son talent musical, Morgan Grace a un lien spécial avec Juno Beach, car son grand-oncle, M. Ronnie Monkman, vétéran de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, s'est rendu à Juno Beach en 2009 dans le cadre d'une délégation d'anciens combattants métis. Morgan Grace est accompagné du guitariste Mitchell McCombs. Mitchell est un multi-instrumentiste de Brandon, Manitoba. Il a un lien profond avec ses racines Ojibwe et métisses. Ensemble, ils joueront la valse Teardrop et la ligne de médecine. S'il vous plaît, veuillez accueillir, please welcome, Morgan Grace and Mitchell McCombs. Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome, le très honorable Justin Trudeau, Premier ministre du Canada. The Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada.
Chers vétérans de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, Votre Altesse royale, Premier ministre Attal, Président Michel du Conseil européen, mes chers amis, c'est un grand honneur pour moi d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui pour souligner le 80e anniversaire du jour J et de la bataille de Normandie. 80 years ago, more than 14,000 Canadians landed at Juno Beach among the roughly 150,000 Allied forces who came ashore in Normandy. These soldiers had friends and family. They had lives and jobs before the war started. On the battlefields, Francophones, Anglophones, Indigenous peoples, and New Canadians came together as one. Brave Canadians like you sacrificed everything for our freedom. There are no words to describe the immensity of the debt we owe you. Il y a 5 ans, lors du 75e et au cours des années, j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer nombreux d'entre vous. Chaque fois, je suis touché par votre candeur et votre humilité, sachant que vous avez tellement donné à votre pays. Vous avez sauvé le monde et nous vous en serons toujours reconnaissants. At age 99, Private William Seaford, who's with us today, enjoys playing bridge with friends multiple times a week. Half of all the people he knows, so he of all people knows how fragile life is, so he's enjoying every second of it. He knows how fragile life is because while in combat, a grenade landed at his feet. He was only 21, and he said, "Not today." So he picked up the grenade and swiftly threw it back. Le sapeur Léopold Thibault, qui est aussi avec nous aujourd'hui, s'était enrôlé à Rimouski quand il avait un peu plus de 20 ans, en 1941. Il a servi en Grande-Bretagne, en France, en Belgique et en Hollande, où il a travaillé sur les ponts Bailey, des ponts préfabriqués portatifs pour permettre aux Alliés d'avancer plus rapidement. Mais les efforts des soldats comme lui ont aussi créé des ponts entre le Canada et tous ces pays qui sont aujourd'hui parmi nos meilleurs amis et alliés. To win the war, the Allied High Command decided that the coast of Normandy would be the target of the amphibious assault on the continent. Canadian infantry and armored troops were assigned a landing zone of their own, right here at Juno Beach. It was a testament to the esteem held for Canadian soldiers that a country with such a relatively small population would be given such an important role in Operation Overlord. And Canadians proved up to the task. On this day, 80 years ago, Canadian troops progressed further inland than any of our allies. It was a remarkable achievement and a costly one, too. 359 Canadiens ont perdu la vie le jour du débarquement. Nous nous souviendrons d'eux. We shall remember them. We remember your sacrifice. We remember your stories. Il est de notre responsabilité à tous de continuer à partager ces histoires pour que les générations futures n'oublient pas l'héroïsme et le courage que cela a pris pour défendre nos libertés et se souvenir aussi des dangers et des horreurs de la guerre. Honorary Lieutenant General Richard Romer, who turned 100 this year and who is also with us today, is one of Canada's most decorated veterans. Over the decades, he's participated in and organized many commemoration events. In his words, the costly D-Day success at Juno Beach laid the unforeseeable foundation for the betterment of mankind. It is important for him that we never forget. So to General Romer, to Sergeant Armitage, who couldn't be here with us today, to able seaman Bill Cameron, who sadly passed away just last weekend. When I spoke with her a few days ago, his daughter Donna told me just how much he'd been looking forward to being here with all of you. His bags have been packed for weeks, and he was so proud to be coming back to Normandy. So for him, and for all the veterans, I can promise you that Canada and the world will keep commemorating this significant day for decades and generations to come. En plus de se remémorer vos histoires, il est de notre devoir à tous de rappeler aux générations de demain les principes pour lesquels vous vous êtes battus. La liberté, la démocratie, la justice. Our way of life didn't happen by accident, and it won't continue without effort. Democracy is still under threat today. It is threatened by aggressors who want to redraw borders. It is threatened by demagoguery, misinformation, disinformation, foreign interference. We must all continue to stand for democracy day in and day out. We owe it to future generations, and we owe it to the great women and men in uniform who sacrificed so much for our collective freedom, lest we forget. Merci.
Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I introduce the delegation of D-Day and the Second World War veterans. Je vais maintenant présenter la délégation d'anciens combattants du jour J et de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Mr. William Seyfried, Monsieur Léopold Thibault, Mr. Jim Parks, Mr. John Priest, Mr. William Wilson, Mr. George Couture, Mr. Russell Monroe, Mr. Joseph Maxwell, Madame Annie McNamara, Mr. Howard McNamara, Mr. Charles Davis, Mr. Jim Spence, and Honorary Lieutenant General, Lieutenant Général Honoraire, Richard Romer. We are honored to have this delegation with here today on Juno Beach. Nous sommes honorés d'avoir cette délégation avec nous aujourd'hui à la plage Juno Beach. Et maintenant, veuillez accueillir une incontournable de la chanson québécoise, Cœur de pirate. And now, Please welcome singer-songwriter Keir de Pirate with her song Criez tout bas.
Il n'y a pas de piano? Je t'ai vu tracer le long du paysage une ligne des aimés qui détruisent ton langage. Et quand tu chantais plus fort dans ton silence, je voyais les larmes couler toujours à contresens. Mais quand les saisons attendront ton retour, ce sera le vent qui portera secours. Et si la terre est sombre, et si la pluie te noie, raconte-moi qu'on puisse trembler ensemble. Et si le jour ne vient pas dans la nuit des perdus, raconte-moi qu'on puisse crier tout bas. J'ai voulu calmer ton rire qui s'étouffait, des courses vers le vide, ton rire qui soupirait. Si tu mets le cap vers des eaux restant troubles, je serai le phare qui te guidera toujours. Mais quand les saisons attendront ton retour, ce sera le vent qui portera secours. Et si la terre est sombre, et si la pluie te noie, raconte-moi qu'on puisse trembler ensemble. Et si le jour ne vient pas dans la nuit des perdus, raconte-moi qu'on puisse crier tout bas. Et si la terre est sombre, et si la pluie te noie, raconte-moi qu'on puisse trembler ensemble. Et si le jour ne vient pas dans la nuit des perdus, raconte-moi qu'on puisse crier tout bas, crier tout bas.
Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome, Son Altesse Royale, le Prince de Galles, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Attal, veterans and distinguished guests. Bonjour, Premier Ministre Trudeau, Premier Ministre Attal, vétérans et distingués invités. I'm honoured to join you to commemorate the bravery and sacrifice of the Canadian troops who gave so much 80 years ago. On June the 6th, 1944, as part of the 150,000 Allied troops that landed or parachuted into Normandy, 14,000 were from Canada. Far from home, they stormed these very sand dunes behind me, shoulder to shoulder with thousands of British troops. Standing here today in peaceful silence, it is almost impossible to grasp the courage it would have taken to run into the fury of battle that very day. The assault on D-Day remains the most ambitious military operation in history. The events of that windy, grey day ultimately led to the liberation of Europe, but it came at a heavy cost. We continue to honour every Canadian who gave so much, every Canadian family who lost a loved one, every Canadian who lived with the scars of battle, both physical and mental. I want to thank you, our veterans, for your extraordinary acts of bravery and sacrifice on Juno Beach and the liberation of Europe. All of you demonstrated heroism and determination that ensured fascism was conquered. The commitment to service displayed by Canadian troops is a great testament to the strength of the people of Canada. Canada and the UK continue to stand side by side, as we did in 1944, just as strong together 80 years later. Ensuring the memory of those who fought for freedom lives on is why we've come together again today, to say thank you. Thank you for our freedom, and thank you for your service. Merci pour notre liberté, et merci pour votre service.
Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome, le Premier ministre de la République française, Gabriel Attal, the Prime Minister of the French Republic, Gabriel Attal.
Votre Altesse royale, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Président du Conseil européen, Monsieur le Président du Sénat, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur le Préfet, Mesdames et Messieurs les parlementaires et les élus, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les officiers généraux, officiers, sous-officiers, officiers mariniers, soldats, matelots et aviateurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les combattants du débarquement, chers vétérans, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'était l'aurore ce matin du 6 juin. C'était l'aurore, le vent soufflait encore et la houle semblait toucher le ciel. C'était l'aurore et en ce matin du 6 juin, la tempête se calmait à peine. Mais rien ne résiste à l'appel de la liberté. Il est 7h35. La bataille suprême commence, malgré les flots déchaînés. En quelques heures, ici même, 15 000 Canadiens de la 3e division d'infanterie, commandée par le major général Rodney Keller, et de la 2e brigade blindée, appuyée par 6 000 Britanniques, déferlent sur Juno Beach. Face à eux, les mines qui explosent, les tirs qui frappent, la marée qui emporte. Face à eux, la barbarie qui se déchaîne dans un sursaut meurtrier. Face à eux, un continent qui attend, qui espère l'arrivée et le triomphe des soldats de la liberté. Mais face à eux, surtout, la France, nation sœur du Canada, la France, terre d'idéal, prisonnière des soldats. La France, et derrière elle, l'Europe meurtrie, et derrière elle, la liberté enchaînée. Venir sur cette plage, c'est se souvenir. C'est revoir ces hommes, si jeunes, venus se battre pour une terre lointaine et inconnue. C'est se laisser inspirer par leur courage, porter par leur bravoure, guidés par leur exploit. C'est s'imaginer ici l'un d'eux monter au front et braver la mitraille. C'est penser là à son frère d'armes, touché, blessé. C'est le voir tomber et ses camarades courir à son secours. C'est entendre résonner, assourdissant, le souffle du vent et le sifflement des balles, le bruit des moteurs, le cri des ordres, le vrombissement des avions. On ne peut vraiment imaginer ce que fut le débarquement. Tous les soldats de la liberté, Canadiens, Britanniques, qui ont foulé le sable de cette plage sont des héros. Tous, sans exception. Notre reconnaissance est éternelle, infinie. Jamais la France n'oubliera ceux qui sont tombés pour elle. Jamais la France n'oubliera que sur ce sable, le sang de la jeunesse canadienne a coulé pour notre liberté. Alors devant vous, vétérans de la bataille de Normandie, qui débarquiez il y a 80 ans pour la première fois sur cette même plage, nous nous rappelons ceux qui sont tombés. Plus de 350 Canadiens, rien que le premier jour sur cette plage. Plus de 5 000 lors de la campagne de Normandie. Plus de 45 000 au cours de toute la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Leur sacrifice reste une blessure vive. Il nous oblige, il nous honore. Et aujourd'hui encore, depuis le cimetière canadien, ceux qui ont payé le tribut de la liberté nous regardent. Nous nous rappelons ceux qui ont été blessés, parfois gravement, souvent à jamais. Nous nous rappelons ceux qui sont revenus, de ceux qui, aujourd'hui encore, racontent, transmettent, alertent. Vous êtes des héros. Vous êtes les voix de ceux qui sont tombés. Vous êtes des figures du courage et à jamais les visages de la liberté. Votre présence aujourd'hui nous rend humbles et notre cœur se serre en sachant qu'il manque quelqu'un, William Cameron, mort quelques jours à peine avant le départ vers la France. Devant vous, sous l'autorité du président de la République, je veux prendre un engagement. La mémoire des vétérans de la Seconde Guerre mondiale ne s'éteindra jamais. Nous la perpétuerons, nous l'honorerons, nous la diffuserons. Car jamais le souffle du courage ne s'éteint, jamais la flamme de l'héroïsme ne faiblit, et toujours la force de la liberté nous guide. Mesdames et messieurs, je suis né en 1989. J'appartiens à une génération qui n'a jamais connu la guerre, une génération dont les parents n'ont jamais connu la guerre, une génération qui a grandi sous le signe de la liberté et de la démocratie, une génération qui parfois oublie combien elles sont fragiles, combien la liberté se gagne, se conquiert et s'entretient. Une génération à qui nous rappellerons sans cesse ce que nous devons à ces jeunes de notre âge qui ont tout quitté pour notre liberté, pour notre démocratie. Car derrière chacun de nos droits, chacune de nos libertés, il y a la marque du sacrifice des soldats du débarquement. L'histoire est une leçon pour l'avenir. Et aujourd'hui, plus que jamais, nous devons l'entendre et l'écouter. L'entendre et l'écouter, alors que la guerre frappe à nouveau l'Europe et que sur le sol ukrainien, on meurt pour avoir commis l'affront de vouloir être libre. Nous devons entendre et écouter l'histoire, car les passions tristes reviennent à la charge. Les passions tristes du rejet, du repli, qui déjà nous ont conduits à l'esprit de défaite, à la soumission, à l'abîme. Mesdames et messieurs, le Canada et la France sont deux nations sœurs, deux nations dont le lien s'est noué dans le sang versé et le bruit des balles. Deux nations dont les destins se sont mêlés une fois de plus, ici, sur le sable de la plage de Juno Beach. Deux nations dont l'amitié restera gravée à jamais dans le marbre de l'histoire. Aujourd'hui, 80 ans après, ensemble, sur cette plage, l'ombre des soldats canadiens s'anime. Le souvenir est vif, l'émotion est grande, les défis sont immenses. Nous serons à la hauteur de leur engagement, à la hauteur de leur courage, à la hauteur de leur sacrifice. Nous leur devons, nous leur en faisons le serment. Vive le Canada, vive l'amitié franco-canadienne, vive la République et vive la France.
Mesdames et Messieurs, le lieutenant-colonel Michel Dion, aumônier des Forces armées canadiennes, et l'anémétiste et vétéran José Searson animeront la prière. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant-colonel Michel Dion, Padre for the Canadian Armed Forces, and Métis Elder and veteran José Searson will lead us in prayer.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to be here with you today and share with you in my first language, which is Cree, and of course in English. No tawinan, Creator God, as we gather here today, we remember the courage of many men and women who displayed skills and dedication to preserve our country and our freedom. We are also grateful for the veterans who returned home safely and are present here with us today. Through their interactions with us, we have been informed about their experiences and their stories. No tawinan, anot skagi sigak, kenanas komitnan, ute epeminot tagusnak. Ego huta ka mamawiak, tagiskisyak anige simagan sinak. Simagan sin, kagi sipeterchik, mitanimanimaga kayasis. Ego teka tagusigik, kiwa patamak, inigok egi ayuman kegon katasigagik, inigok tapepo, egi uchim mamagutachik. Ego mina, mitanigietuskatagik, ketsinats, kawes tawitsiguagok, kawes tageminoya kuta. Ego mina, mego atsayo, negiskistinan, atitani kita tagus nakawi, kipegagiwewok. Ego kipegagiwewok, tagitianis, utegi peitu tertsik. Ego eiho, gigaskitanan, miayagok. Eatsemutsik, tanse, kagis panikotsik, ispika gamastika itu tertsik. Ego kisik, eatsemutsik, atsemuna, eatsik. And so we thank you, Lord. No tawinan, ka ginautse, kagipe shitas kawiak. Ego speak at stipetiak. Niwago magandanak. Niwichogandanak. Ninanashkomawak. Inigok. Egi shitas kawachik. Ani shimagan stikana. Ego speak ashashipeten. Ego kagige. Ego stikайте ni tenano. Egawi gats kitawan gishkisiak. Kagige. Mina kagige. And so, Father, we just thank you for all your blessings for families, friends, and veterans whom we will never forget forever and ever. Thank you.
Today, on this 80th anniversary of the D-Day landing, we pause to remember the more than 14,000 members of the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force who participated in that fierce battle here at Juno Beach. We pause to humbly express our gratitude for the countless blessings that their hard-earned victory continues to provide all Canadians and many other nations in their daily lives today. But most importantly, we pause to reflect on how their sufferings and sacrifices experienced here in Normandy 80 years ago bestows upon we today, in return, with a solemn duty of remembrance. Indeed, it is incumbent to each and every one of us to derive from this historic battle invaluable insights of existential meaning, significance, and purpose that may bring humankind to dedicate itself more resolutely to building a more just and peace-filled world in the future. Aujourd'hui, la présence de quelques anciens combattants canadiens parmi nous, malgré leur grand âge, nous réjouit et nous inspire profondément. Vous êtes pour nous l'incarnation vivante du courage et du service. Veuillez accepter notre éternelle reconnaissance et sachez que nous nous souviendrons de notre devoir solennel de tenir bien haut le flambeau qui nous a été confié. We recognize that the freedoms that we benefit from today came at a great cost. We pay tribute to the 359 Canadians who made the ultimate sacrifice on that day to begin the liberation of the French people, for whom war came to their doorstep and changed their lives forever. Nous demandons que les membres des forces armées canadiennes puissent, avec un cœur loyal et un dévouement inébranlable, toujours persévérer dans leur service dans les moments d'adversité, comme l'ont fait autrefois ceux qui ont combattu sur cette plage. We humbly ask for blessings upon our sovereign, His Majesty Charles III, King of Canada, and all our political, military, and community leaders. May they serve the people of Canada with wisdom and understanding in the dynamics that makes this nation diverse, with people in culture, a heritage of freedom, in openness to others, in a love for peace. May they also help us to reconcile our ancestry into a unique expression of mutual respect of the dignity of every human person. Qu'il en soit ainsi et que nous puissions tous nous efforcer de poursuivre nos efforts pour construire un monde meilleur.
Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, please join us for the Act of Remembrance by Caporal Tricia Daigle of the Canadian Armed Forces on behalf of veterans. Mesdames et Messieurs, veuillez vous joindre à nous pour l'acte du souvenir qui sera récité par la caporale Tricia Daigle des Forces armées canadiennes au nom des anciens combattants. Veuillez répondre par « Nous nous souviendrons d'eux ».
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Ils ne vieilliront pas, comme nous, qui leur avons survécu. Ils ne connaîtront jamais l'outrage, ni le poids des années. Quand viendra l'heure du crépuscule et celle de l'aurore, nous nous souviendrons d'eux.
And now, the commitment to remember will be recited by Miles Olduzinski, Aimé Bernatchez Provençal, and Jadis Colombe. Please respond with, "We will remember them." La promesse du souvenir sera récitée par Miles Olduzinski, Aimé Bernatchez Provençal et Joanne Colombe. Veuillez répondre par « Nous nous souviendrons d'eux ».
They were young, as we are young. They served, giving freely of themselves. To them, we pledge, amid the winds of time, to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them.
Ils étaient jeunes, jeunes comme nous. Ils ont servi, donnant généreusement d'eux-mêmes. Nous leur promettons, en dépit du temps qui passe, de porter le flambeau et de ne jamais oublier. Nous nous souviendrons d'eux.
Taganoges kisiak, kioskate suak, tapeskuts, kaesioskate siak. Kipagetin suak, egagegwan, emetsemenigo chikwinoa. Kaetenasquena moana anak, kake pese pumma techik. Peotanak, tapimotata chik, otisk kotemewao, mina egawigats. Tuanakis kisiak, kagiskis tutawananak.
Ladies and gentlemen, Caporal Stephen Abra will play the last post, followed by a minute of silence and a rouse. The lament will follow, played by Sergeant Brennan, Pinkerton Cook. Mesdames et Messieurs, le caporal Stephen Abra va jouer la dernière sonnerie, suivie d'une minute de silence et le réveil. L'élégie suivra, interprétée par le sergent Brennan, Pinkerton Cook. Mesdames et Messieurs, nos distingués invités, le Premier ministre du Canada, Son Altesse royale le Prince de Galles et le Premier ministre de la République française déposeront les gerbes d'honneur. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guest, the Prime Minister of Canada, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, and the Prime Minister of France, will now lay wreaths. Le dépôt des gerbes sera accompagné par la musique du centenaire de l'aviation royale canadienne. La formation musicale est composée de membres de la musique centrale des Forces armées canadiennes d'Ottawa, de la musique du 438e escadron tactique d'hélicoptères de Saint-Hubert, Québec, et de l'aviation royale canadienne de Winnipeg. The laying of the wreaths will be accompanied by the music of the Royal Canadian Air Force Centennial Band. The band is comprised of members of the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces from Ottawa, the 438 Tactical Helicopter Squadron Band from Saint-Hubert, Québec, and the Royal Canadian Air Force Band from Winnipeg. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. It is now time to introduce our final act of the ceremony. Performing their song, Highway of Heroes, please welcome the Troops. Il est maintenant temps de présenter le dernier acte de notre cérémonie. Interprétant leur chanson, Highways of Heroes, veuillez accueillir the Troops.
Day I shipped out and numbered a dozen. Upon my return, we're 100 or so, from the coast and from the prairies. I bet they keep coming. Add one more name from Ontario and carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above, with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. I served with distinction, no visions of glory. I served without question, a personal gain. Seek no justification, it's not part of my story, and it offers no comfort to the ones who remain. Just carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above, with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. Took up my vocation, I was called by my nation. Without hesitation, my answer I gave. Now I am not wondering the things that I might have been. I'm no consolation to the forgotten brave. So carry me home down the highway of heroes. Softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. Carry me home down the highway of heroes.
Mesdames et Messieurs, nous vous remercions pour votre présence et votre engagement à ne pas oublier. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for your presence and commitment to remember. Please stand for the departure salute au Canada. Je vous prierai de vous lever pour le salut de départ au Canada.
Parade! Royal salute! Salute! Parade! Attention!
We're going to be back in Montreal. Yeah. I remember a little bit. Yeah.
How many times have you been to Normandy?
Twice. This is the second time. He came 40 years ago. He says it's like a dream he's going to wake up from. He doesn't want to wake up.
So your memory, does it bring anything back to you?
Huh? Does it? Oh, it brings a lot of things back. Everything went by. 100 years, 104 years. A lot of it. Very nostalgic.
I'm sure.
Your head gets full that you don't know where you're going after that. But anyway, I love it to come back.
But it's all changed since you were here.
Yeah.
That's what we were looking at.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir.
You see all them people I was with, and I don't know, that makes me feel good. To help, to be able to help somebody else. That was the first thing.
Very nice. It's so wonderful. Very happy birthday.
Stand up! Eat!
I was 18 and his grandson was in the same convoy. The name of the ship was the Stratheden, part of the Peninsula and Oriental line. So,
Bonjour, monsieur. Wonderful. Ça fait plaisir de vous rencontrer. J'ai bien connu votre père, mais elle a fait père. Ah oui, ça me fait plaisir de venir à l'Angleterre. Je sais que j'ai aidé. J'ai 104.
allowing me to share your story.
That was so special.
J'en imagine beaucoup. J'en imagine beaucoup parce que je suis sûr de la guerre aussi.
Best wishes to King.
Charles here, who we are very grateful.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
August 41. My grandson, who was a lieutenant in the Canadian Navy, I was telling him when I landed, and he looked it up. And he said, "You landed on the 1st of September." I said, "That's true." So did the Prince he was in the same convoy and everything.
Thank you very much.
That's the pin you wanted to get.
Oh,
The
yes.
City of Windsor.
Oh, thank you very much.
Your grandmother was there years ago.
Yeah.
When I was much smaller.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Thank you.
Have you been back to Normandy before?
I've been here six times. Once was on a visit to Dieppe for the
Dieppe raid.
Dieppe raid, and my grandson and I drove down to Juneau there and had a jug of wine on the farm.
Jug of wine.
Not just a small bottle.
Wish you best of luck.
Félicitations.
served in Burma during the D-Day operations in Burma. Yeah, 4 years in Burma. So they kept me busy against the Japanese.
Have you been to Normandy before then?
No. The first time today. Thank you very much.
Not at all. What was your role? Where were you on D-Day? Well, you're quite right. You're around. You may have met Charles. Sounds like you could do a lot of training around there.
Annie and Howard are married. They married after the war.
We all need to get some tips off you two. How you very nice to see you. Have you been along with you before? Best time.
Italian campaign.
Whereabouts? How many hours did you fly? Quite a few, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's a real honor.
Thank you.
Very nice to see you. Where are you from? And is this your first time on the beach? Very different to what it must have been like 80 years ago. I hadn't appreciated how She's very shallow. Oh, look at this.
Very impressive.
Just about. Full naval uniform. Yeah. It's amazing how.
I thought you'd be interested in something. I happen to know this guy too.
Yeah, you met him a few times. Can I keep that on the boards? Is that for me, Jim, or is that for
Just for me, just to show you. It's a legacy.
I don't take it.
Yes.
I don't take it. I got more than one. Right, you got one copy. Then I'll take it. Thank you, Jim. Real awesome.
He just got a photo.
John, how are you? Where are you from?
Clary.
Did they get you out? Jim, all right? Where were you? quite an emotional day for you. Was it quite an emotional day for you being here?
Just a few, some were home too.
Over here, sir. Darryl.
You have this one?
Yeah,
Same for
General, sorry.
It's called the bleu. Le bleu.
Can we make some space, please? Keep stepping back, please.
Attention! Attention! Guard. Move to left of threes. Left! Turn! Praise! Stand at ease. Guard. Advance. Right turn. Stand at ease. Stay easy, relax. Man.
Pour les invités munis de bracelets bleus qui assistent à la cérémonie internationale, veuillez vous rendre directement à la navette à la sortie. Le personnel sera là pour vous guider. Merci. For invited guests with a blue wristband who are attending the international ceremony, please proceed directly to the bus at the exit. Staff will assist you. Thank you.
Again, you're right in the way. It's so much time getting over. Say hi. Good to see you. I'll see you in 2 days.
Vous êtes prêt, Monsieur Thibault?
Hein?
Vous êtes prêt? Je vous amène aux médias.
Oh boy.
Careful, please. Là, de tout le monde.
Yeux d'oreille, côté gauche, fait que je vais...
Pas du côté droit.
Il n'entend pas du tout.
J'ai
parler doucement.
Et voilà. Je vous présente Monsieur Léopold Thibault.
You a Canadian?
Okay.
Hunch.
I don't want one.
Crucially, local authorities have a statutory duty to identify and to provide support for pupils with additional support needs, regardless of their diagnosis. We're working with NHS boards and local authorities to improve the support available and allocated £55.5 million to boards in 23-24 to improve mental health and neurodevelopmental services.
Edward Mountain.
Well, Presiding Officer, if that's an answer, I don't know what I am doing in this Parliament. Let me help the Cabinet, the Minister. There's 24,096 children on NDAS waiting lists. In fact, some people don't even have, some NHS and councils don't even have waiting lists. But Ayrshire and Arran are saying that it's going to take 19 years and 3 months to clear their NDAS waiting list. Now, in the Highlands, as I said, the council doesn't have a list. NHS Highland doesn't have a list. Will the government at least tell them to get a list drawn up so we know how many children actually need help?
Minister.
I can assure the member that we're working with all NHS boards, including NHS Highland, to improve neurodevelopmental support and pathways, and we're working with local authorities to ensure that the support is there for children and young people, regardless of whether they have a diagnosis or not. As well as the investments to health boards, we've provided over £1 million in recent years to the Fund 5 neurodevelopmental tests of change, including one in Highland. They are focused on implementing the ND specification, including delivery of GIRFIC and multi-agency working, and we will continue to support health boards and local authorities to work together in line with the specification to ensure that the support is there for children who need it.
Question number 5, Russell Finlay.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it has any plans to revise the terms of reference that it is set for the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry.
Minister Natalie Dawn.
There are currently no plans to amend the remit of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. Questions about the scope of the inquiry in relation to non-residential settings has been raised previously, and ministers have made clear the need for the inquiry to focus on its current and wide-ranging terms of reference, centred on the abuse of children within institutions which had legal responsibility for the long-term care of children. Widening the remit of the inquiry to include abuse in non-residential settings would result in it taking much longer to respond to the survivors of abuse in care.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. There are two classes of child abuse victims in Scotland, those who are heard by the inquiry and those who are not. Victims like Susie Henderson, whose childhood was destroyed by a legal establishment paedophile ring, and victims like Peter Haynes and Stuart McMillan, whose childhoods were destroyed by industrial-scale abuse in Scottish football. They and many others simply don't understand why the inquiry is closed to them. They've also been fed misinformation from this government. Last year, Nicola Sturgeon told me the inquiry's remit is a matter for the inquiry. This is not true. I've asked ministers to widen the inquiry's remit, but they continually refuse. So today, again, I urge the Minister to do the right thing by these victims, and will her government please think again?
Minister.
I want to make really clear that our sympathies are absolutely with all victims of historical abuse. However, as the member knows, and as I've just reiterated, the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry was set up under the Inquiries Act 2005 to investigate the abuse of children in care in Scotland, following a call over many years from survivors of in-care abuse. Now, ministers have made clear the need for the inquiry to focus on its current and wide-ranging terms. While we, the Scottish Ministers, set the terms of reference for the inquiry, thereafter it has been the responsibility of Lady Smith, Chair of the inquiry, to decide on what is considered as part of the inquiry. And we are fully committed to maintaining the inquiry's independence from the Government. In terms of investigation and prosecution of those guilty of abuse, this would remain a matter for Police Scotland and the courts.
Question number 6, Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reported calls for a moratorium on the closure of publicly owned care homes.
Minister Marie Todd.
No one wants to see the closure of good quality care homes, and I understand the concern that this causes for residents and for their families. Regrettably, there will be situations where local authority-run care homes close for various reasons. And although we have overall responsibility for health and social care policy in Scotland, the statutory responsibility for delivering these services are for integration authorities to make in consultation with people who use those services and in full awareness of the impact on them. It wouldn't be appropriate for the Scottish Government to directly intervene in local decision-making. No one wants to see, let me reiterate again, the closure of good quality care homes. I absolutely understand the concern that this is causing for residents and their families.
Smith.
The Minister will know that a disproportionate number of care home closures in Scotland in recent years were publicly owned, and those in rural areas at a time that we have a delayed discharge crisis. In Lanarkshire last year, 64 people died while stuck in hospital on delayed discharge. People in Clydesdale were promised a step-down facility. Instead, what they're getting is the closure of McClymont Care Home, which has space to provide that facility, but is being closed. Now, even at this stage, will the Minister step in and stop that closure, because she has the power, because ultimately those partnerships are funded directly by the Government?
Minister.
The member will be aware that I have met with families who are impacted by this closure in that area. I have also met with the Chief Officer and discussed this particular closure with the local IJB. The decision to close the care homes in South Lanarkshire was taken by the IJB. If I were to override local decision-making in what is a Labour-run council area, members would be very quick to criticise me for intervening in a matter of devolved competence. So let me be clear. We don't want to see the closure of good quality care homes and services. We understand the concern this causes for residents and their families. We are acutely aware of the pressures faced by social care sector as a whole at present, and we are very grateful for the efforts of the social care workforce who continue to support our communities. The statutory responsibility for delivering commissioning...
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. A brief supplementary from Claire Hawley.
New data from the Home Office shows that health and care worker visas were 76% lower in January to April this year compared to last year. Does the Minister agree this will negatively impact the day-to-day operation of publicly owned care homes? And does she agree that the incoming UK Government should overturn these cruel immigration policies that harm our care sector?
On matters for which the Scottish Government has general responsibility, and a concise response, please, Minister.
Okay, let me say I absolutely agree with the point that Claire Hawley makes. The workforce in social care is under real pressure and has been supported by immigrants for many years in Scotland. We need to have a system of immigration which delivers a workforce to do really important work, vital work for our nation, looking after our loved ones. And we need a system that works in Scotland. The current system is absolutely broken and does not deliver to our needs in Scotland.
Question number 7, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it has taken to prevent children and young people from overdosing on over-the-counter medication.
Mr Jenny Minto.
The Medicines, Healthcare and Products Regulatory Agency, in combination with retailers, limits the sale of paracetamol to a maximum of 2 packets of 16 tablets. The aim of these voluntary measures is to balance the need for people to access pain relief medicines against the dangers for vulnerable individuals to purchase on impulse excessive quantities of any single analgesic. A community pharmacy may sell larger packs under the supervision of a pharmacist. It is illegal to sell more than 100 tablets or capsules of either paracetamol or aspirin in any one retail transaction.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I recently received correspondence from the health professionals expressing concern over instances of young people overdosing on common painkillers such as paracetamol. They also expressed concern over the lack of data relating to this issue. When I wrote to the Minister, she responded that National Records of Scotland does not publish an age breakdown of this data. Therefore, I asked the Minister what action is her government taking to increase the availability of data relating to drug overdose and age.
Minister.
I thank Pam Gosal for her question and recognise the work that she's been doing, as she referenced, in the fact that she has written to me. And she is correct. I responded by saying National Records of Scotland does not publish an age breakdown of this data. However, I'd be very happy to meet with the member to discuss this further, to understand the concerns that have been raised by her constituents.
Question number 8, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is investing in affordable homes within Glasgow, including within the Glasgow, Maryhill and Springburn constituency, to help address housing need.
Precise response, Minister. Paul McLennan.
The Scottish Government has made £328 million funding available to Glasgow for investment in affordable housing over the first years of the current Parliament, with a further £78.6 million for 2024-25 has been allocated. From this funding, £26.8 million is planned for investment over the same period in the Maryhill and Springburn constituency area. This investment will provide an additional 455 homes for Maryhill and Springburn communities.
Doris.
I thank the Minister for that answer. NG Homes in my constituency are seeking to develop innovative ways to bring void properties back into use as affordable homes, including 25 void tenemental properties at Stonyhurst Street, Postle Park, a challenge over several years. Can I ask the Minister if they will meet with myself and NG Homes to discuss their ideas regarding innovation around void properties more generally, perhaps in Postle Park itself, to see both the challenges and opportunities presented at sites such as the Stonyhurst Street site?
Minister.
Yeah, I'm aware that NG Homes have already engaged with Glasgow City Council, who manage the Affordable Housing Supply Programme in Glasgow through TMDF. Glasgow City Council have agreed to provide funding to undertake a feasibility study to consider options for redevelopment of the pre-1919 tenement building. This study is now underway in Glasgow City Council. We'll meet with NG Homes in completion of this to consider the next steps. I'm planning to meet with all of the RSLs operating in Glasgow over the summer, and we'd be happy to discuss them then.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. Question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and for the opportunity for each party to make some remarks about D-Day. 80 years ago today, British soldiers joined those from America, Canada and other nations to board planes, ships and landing craft to begin the liberation of Europe. The men who were parachuted into Normandy or landed at Gold, Juno, Sword, Omaha or Utah beaches on the 6th of June headed into danger and uncertainty. They were met with mines, barbed wires and the guns of the German defenders. 4,414 of the men involved in Operation Neptune alone would lose their lives. But their sacrifice and the brave efforts of all those individuals on that historic day played a key part in the downfall of Nazism and ensuring the freedom and democracy for Western Europe. On this day, the 80th anniversary, and as the veterans of that day become fewer and fewer, and the event passes from memory to history, our need to remember their heroism becomes ever more important. So today and always, we will remember them. Thank you. Could I ask the Deputy First Minister, does she agree that granting new oil and gas licences for the North Sea is essential not only for our energy security, but to protect tens of thousands of jobs here in Scotland.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I start, Presiding Officer, by echoing Douglas Ross's comments. Today is a day for reflection on the sacrifice and the bravery of all those who served during the Second World War, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice and laid down their lives for us in pursuit of a better world. And the youthful faces that we have seen in the photographs this morning with the TV coverage stay with us and have certainly reminded me of my loved ones. Were it not for the courageous actions of those brave men and women, we would not enjoy the freedoms which we now take for granted, including the freedom to debate and disagree this very afternoon. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And as we mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day today, we will never forget those who have and continue to lay down their lives in the service of their country, and we will never take our freedoms for granted. Well, Presiding Officer, we're absolutely crystal clear in our support for a just transition for Scotland's oil and gas sector, which recognises the declining nature of the North Sea basin and is in line with our climate change commitments. Because the difference between this party and the Conservatives is that we will never abandon our workers, we will never leave a legacy of inequality, and we will never destroy communities like the Tories did in the last transition. Any further extraction must be consistent with our climate obligations, and we must approach licensing on a rigorously evidence-led, case-by-case basis, with robust climate compatibility and energy security being key considerations. Douglas Ross may not care very much for doing the hard work to understand the evidence of decisions, as he confessed earlier this week with Liz Truss's budget, but we are evidence-led, and we will ensure our decisions on North Sea oil and gas are consistent with the evidence.
Douglas Ross.
Well, the evidence is very clear. The SNP plans to be against any new oil and gas licences will see tens of thousands of jobs lost in the North Sea and the North East. That's the evidence. That is very clear. Now, the Deputy First Minister also said this week. She said about the SNP, and I quote, have never said no to new oil and gas licences. But of course, they opposed the Rosebank field. They opposed Cambo. And let's just hear what one of her government colleagues has said. Mary McCallum, the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, said clearly the Scottish Government, and I quote the Energy Secretary's words, do not agree with the UK Government issuing new oil and gas licences. How can the SNP even pretend to support the oil and gas sector and the jobs that are crucial to it when their own Energy Secretary says that?
Deputy First Minister.
Very difficult to believe the Tories on oil and gas, when we know that Douglas Ross's party has been exploiting Scotland's oil and gas to fill their budget holes for decades. And what's Scotland got to show for it? Austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. We've never proposed a policy of no further North Sea licensing at all. We have said quite clearly that it has to be compatible with our climate change obligations, and any licensing process has to be subject to a robust climate compatibility checkpoint. But Douglas Ross wants to talk about evidence. The scientific evidence is clear. There is an urgent need to transition away from fossil fuels globally if the Paris Agreement climate goals are to be met. And our focus is on meeting our energy needs, reducing emissions and ultimately delivering affordable energy.
Douglas Ross.
The Deputy First Minister didn't want to listen to the Conservatives on this. I was simply quoting her Cabinet colleague. The Scottish Government, the SNP Cabinet Secretary for Energy, says we do not agree with the UK Government issuing new oil and gas licences. That's not me saying that. That is the SNP's Energy Secretary. And if the Deputy First Minister is trying to distance herself from those comments, there's more. Here's Hamza Yousaf, the SNP leader until just last month. He said, and I quote, I don't think it was the right thing to do to grant 100 new licences. The SNP leader before that, Nicola Sturgeon, says, I don't think we can continue to give the go-ahead to new oil fields. And several times just this week, I asked John Swinney directly if the SNP backed new oil and gas licences. He wouldn't give a straight answer. So here's an opportunity for the Deputy First Minister. Does the SNP Scottish Government agree that new oil and gas licences for the North Sea should be granted, yes or no?
Deputy First Minister.
I have been very clear in our approach, and our approach is that we will continue to support the workers, we will continue to support the industry in line with our climate change obligations, and the industry itself believes in that transition. But the facts speak for themselves in terms of what we are doing. Last month alone, we saw progress of 2 significant projects that will drive forward our energy transition and underline our position as an energy powerhouse. The groundbreaking on Sumitomo's £350 million high-voltage direct current cable factory and the investment that was made through Haventus in the redevelopment of Ardisea Port. That's because this government believes in a just transition, a transition that does not leave the workers behind, that does not turn the taps off overnight, but is very conscious of our climate change obligations. And we've heard a lot of figures this week that have been cooked up by the Tories, and the bottom line for us is that we are led by the evidence, and we will always back the North East and Scottish workers.
Douglas Ross.
People might not have realised listening to that answer. I'd simply ask the Deputy First Minister, yes or no, do the SNP agree with the granting of new oil and gas licences? And we got nothing. No answer whatsoever about that specific question. So let me be clear. The Scottish Conservatives support new oil and gas licences because new developments will protect jobs in the North East of Scotland. But they will also support the just transition to net zero. They'll keep bills down, they'll prevent us having to import costly oil from foreign countries, and they will secure Scotland's energy future. Now, they're trying to pretend otherwise, Presiding Officer, but the SNP are against new oil and gas licences, regardless of the impact on workers affected. And if we're speaking about evidence, I go back again to the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. They said in a report that the position to not grant new oil and gas licences would put 100,000 jobs at risk. So, Deputy First Minister, why are the SNP ignoring them?
Deputy First Minister.
I think Douglas Ross might find that the same report had some criticisms for the Conservatives as well. But Douglas Ross talks about supporting the North East, and I've been very clear about our position of new licences. But of course, if Douglas Ross wants to back the North East, there's some big questions for him this very day, on a day that he betrays a Conservative candidate in the North East, who the Conservatives trusted to be a minister in the UK government, who's currently recovering from ill health, who was planning to stand for re-election and who was supported by local members. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Douglas Ross said he wasn't going to stand again for Westminster because he wanted to focus on Holyrood in 2026. Our position is clear. We will back the North East, we will back workers, and we intend on achieving our climate change aims.
Question number 2, Jackie Bailey.
Presiding Officer, I share the sentiments of the Deputy First Minister and Douglas Ross on this day, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It is right that we commemorate all those Scottish, British and Commonwealth soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom and liberty in Europe. We will remember them. On Sunday, it was revealed that the SNP will effectively hand back up to £500 million of funding that should have been spent on crucial economic and anti-poverty projects across Scotland. That is simply a scandal. And it happened when Kate Forbes was Finance Secretary. £158 million already handed back because of SNP failure to meet annual expenditure targets. A further £136 million not spent by the deadline of the end of 2023. And a further £280 million still to be claimed. All confirmed today by the independent experts at the Scottish Parliament. And this is just the latest example of SNP financial incompetence. So can the Deputy First Minister tell me how the SNP has made such a mess of this?
Deputy First Minister.
the member quite clearly today, quoting from that very same Spice report, that they could not find evidence for the £450 million claim. We said that very clearly earlier this week, and the Spice report also indicates that £450 million is not one that they recognise. The points about this story are clear. First of all, final expenditure figures will not be known until the programme formally closes in 2025. To have spent all the money a year in advance, I think, would raise questions itself. Secondly, we do not expect the final figures to be markedly different from elsewhere in the UK, or indeed from previous programmes. So our commitment is to spend as much of the money as possible. And of course the irony of the question is that the Labour Party have no intention of ever returning Scotland to Europe and therefore depriving us of European funding indefinitely.
Becky Bailey. Do you know what's interesting is the clawback in Scotland is going to be greater than anywhere else in the UK. The 28% is likely to be the scale of return in Scotland. In Wales, it's 9%. In England, 6%. In Northern Ireland, 2%. Can I gently as possible tell Kate Forbes that I used to oversee EU structural funds, so I know how the claims work. And I know the life-changing impact the money can have. And I do not buy her excuses for 1 second, because this comes down to the financial incompetence of this SNP government. At a time when people are crying out for help during a cost of living crisis and our public services are stripped to the bone, it is unforgivable that the SNP are wasting taxpayers' money. And the scale of the incompetence goes even further, Presiding Officer. New analysis published by the Scottish Labour Party today reveals the SNP... Oh, wait for it, reveals that the SNP has wasted £5 billion since they came to office. That includes agency spend costing the NHS over £1.6 billion, delayed discharge costing over £1.3 billion, ferries now £330 million over budget, and the list goes on. Given the real challenges in the country, can the Deputy First Minister explain to the people of Scotland why the SNP is wasting their money? Because that is utterly indefensible.
Deputy First Minister.
What is indefensible is that the party pretending to offer change is shortchanging Scotland by adopting Conservative budget rules. We know that under the Conservatives' budget, there was a proposed £19 billion cut to UK public services. And to quote another Labour spokesperson, all roads lead back to Westminster, and therefore there is profoundly difficult choices ahead if the Labour Party continue with their plans of adopting Tory rules. Rachel Reeves has said that there is no more money. She's made a virtue of that. And when you look at the money coming to the NHS alone, it's less than what the Conservatives were promising. When it comes to the Scottish Government's position on the budget, we look at the EU structural funds, look at the projects that have benefited from it. From the Highlands to the Lowlands, there has been significant benefit. We will continue to maximise the funding that is available to ensure that we tackle child poverty, grow the economy and meet net zero.
Becky Bailey.
Well, that was a desperate response from the Deputy First Minister. She had no answer for the £5 billion of waste generated under her watch, and she knows that she is misleading this chamber because there will be no return to austerity under Labour. Do you know, her attack is straight out of the Tory playbook. And is she not aware that the people of Scotland can see right through that very desperate spin from the SNP? People are tired of the chaos, they're tired of the sleaze, they're tired of SNP politicians not treating Scottish taxpayers' money with respect. Failing to use millions of pounds isn't treating the taxpayer with respect. Wasting £5 billion of public money isn't treating the taxpayer with respect. Defending Michael Matheson and his £11,000 iPad bill isn't treating the taxpayer with respect. People across Scotland are sick of the SNP putting party before country and sick of the financial incompetence that they end up paying for. Last year, Kate Forbes attacked Hamza Youssef, saying that continuity wouldn't cut it. But she seems to have failed to learn her own lesson, because all we have heard today is more of the same. Members. Is it any wonder that the people of Scotland are crying out for change from 14 years of Tory chaos and 17 years of SNP
Thank you, Ms Bailey. Deputy First Minister.
Crying out for change, and they're not going to get it with Labour, that is for sure. And let me start with a point of consensus, that I think the public do want to be treated with respect, and they are tired of spin. And Labour have spent this week accusing the Conservatives of spinning numbers. And that's precisely why I think there's the air of hypocrisy right now in terms of the figures that Jackie Bailey has come to this chamber with. Because at the end of the day, Labour have to answer a question from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. They have said that Labour are effectively signing up to sharp spending cuts. They need to have an answer to that, and I have not heard one yet.
Deputy First Minister, I am aware of several contributions on an ongoing basis from these benches. I'd be grateful if you could desist. Deputy First Minister.
And at the end of the day, we are proud of our record, because our most recent budget, using progressive taxation, has seen the Scottish Child Payment increase, has seen the best performing A&E in this country, has delivered for business in terms of slashing or abolishing rates for businesses, and has made Scotland the top destination outside London for foreign direct investment. That is a record to be proud of, but it would be a lot easier to deliver these game-changing policies if we didn't have Tory austerity and repeat.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day, I've found myself reflecting on a particular evening of the 2016 election campaign when I knocked a door not too far from here, and that door was answered by a 96-year-old gentleman who invited me in to admire his collection of bagpipes. Not only that, but he taught me my first ever bagpipe lesson. What blew me away was that those were the pipes that he'd used to bring the troops ashore at Sword Beach in Normandy on D-Day 80 years ago. I reflect on his memory, and sadly he has passed away now, and all too many veterans have. This may be the last time we commemorate an anniversary with people who were actually there to commemorate it with us. We reflect on their sacrifice on the altar of freedom and the cause of democracy and against the tyranny of Nazism, and we will remember them. To ask the Deputy First Minister when the Cabinet will next meet.
Tuesday. First Minister. Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful for that reply. Presiding Officer, in the early hours of 5th July 2015, John Yule and Lamara Bell were returning from a camping trip when their car left the road on the M9. The police were alerted to the crash but didn't turn up for 3 days. All the while, Lamara was still alive, trapped, calling for help. She may have survived if help had arrived sooner. In the weeks beforehand, my party had been warning about the chaos in the call centre at Bilston Glen, caused by the rushed centralisation of the police by the SNP government. John Swinney was Deputy First Minister at the time. The fatal accident inquiry system is so broken that it has taken 9 years to report on the deaths of John and Lamara, with final conclusions only published last week. Will the Deputy First Minister accept that her government has failed on 2 counts? First, the botched centralisation that contributed to this tragedy in the first place, and second, the intolerable wait for answers the families have had to endure.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I start by expressing my deepest sympathies to the families and friends of Lamara Bell and John Yule. When the situation happened, the former Justice Secretary also was quite clear in his statement to Parliament following the court ruling, our deepest apologies, and the former Chief Constable has also unreservedly apologised to the families, and I repeat that this afternoon. In terms of the points that Alex Cole-Hamilton has raised, I think it's important that we start by looking at the lessons that have been learned, because all the recommendations of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary's independent review into Police Scotland's Contact Command and Control Division have now been implemented. And I note that the fatal accident inquiry found that lessons have been learned and that the public should have confidence in Police Scotland's ability to respond to the calls made. Alex Cole-Hamilton has also made a point on the fatal accident inquiry. Obviously, the conduct of investigations that leads to fatal accident inquiries are a matter for the Lord Advocate and her staff, acting independently of government. But I understand that this issue has been raised with the Solicitor General, and the Solicitor General has indicated that she is willing to come back to Parliament to answer questions more fully.
Thank you. Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Deputy First Minister whether the Scottish Government will review the impact of the short-term licensing legislation in light of the upcoming summer tourist season.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I refer members to my register of interest in terms of close family members running a B&B. The short-term licensing scheme is aimed at ensuring that everyone coming to Scotland can be assured of safe, high-quality accommodation. That is especially important as we approach a very busy summer tourist season. We recognise the growth of the short-term let sector and its importance to Scottish tourism, and as a result, hosts have invested in the future of their businesses and are providing assurances to guests on safety and quality. We are already undertaking planned monitoring of the legislation, and we recently laid a statutory amendment which makes technical changes as a result of feedback. And if Parliament approves that amendment, it will further support business activity and clarify exemptions. We'll update Parliament in the summer on the scheme's implementation, informed by our ongoing engagement with stakeholders.
Christine Graham.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. During the debate on the legislation, I raised concerns about the reach of the regulations, as it includes, for example, yurts, tree houses and even lighthouses, but also on local pressures for accommodation at times of popular tourist events, such as in my constituency, the Melrose Sevens, the Melrose Book Festival and common ridings across the borders. Flexibility to local authorities was, I understand, part of the solution. I understand from what the Deputy First Minister says that the Government is monitoring this. Can you advise the Parliament if the flexibility is working?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member makes a very important point, particularly about these very important tourist events locally. And I can confirm that the latest statutory amendment, if approved, provides additional flexibility around the periods that local authorities are able to administer temporary exemptions to the licences, which should hopefully be of use when it comes to these important events. And as Christine Graham has said, that's hugely important. Many authorities have chosen to offer those already. The Minister for Housing, Paul McLennan, will update Parliament on implementation shortly, which will cover local delivery. But we continue to monitor the implementation of the scheme and take on board any feedback from stakeholders.
Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We can all agree that the rollout of this scheme has certainly not been without its challenges over the last few years. Not my words, but those of the Deputy First Minister to her constituents and businesses in the Highlands. Tourism leaders have been clear that there is irreversible damage being caused by these regulations, something which seems to be falling on deaf ears within the Scottish Government. We need to see changes, and we need to see them now. That is why the Housing Minister has not gone far enough and simply demonstrates how badly this legislation was drafted and implemented in the first place. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister to actually act on this today, for ministers to suspend the legislation until a full review can take place and Parliament can fix the problems this government has created?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the fact that Miles Briggs was able to quote me suggests that I am very actively engaged in the issues and obviously have a lot of interest in it locally in my Highland constituency. The point here is that we are very responsive to feedback. We'll continue to engage with stakeholders, and indeed only 2 days ago I had a meeting with the Association of Scottish Self-Caterers to hear about their experience in full, and I'll continue to work with the Housing Minister, who has been exemplary in his engagement, to ensure we take any feedback on board.
Thank you. Question number 5, Tess White.
To ask the Deputy First Minister how the Scottish Government will prevent further GP practice closures in light of reports that the number of surgeries has declined in every NHS board since 2015.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, GPs are essential to the delivery of high-quality, sustainable general practice service, and we remain fully committed to increasing the number of GPs in Scotland by 800 by 2027. To support general practice, we have significantly expanded the primary care multidisciplinary team workforce with over 4,700 staff working in services, and we're supporting development of the teams through investment of about £190 million in the Primary Care Improvement Fund. The latest data from Public Health Scotland reflects a trend towards fewer but larger practices that incorporate the multidisciplinary teams to provide a wider range of services.
Tess White.
Deputy First Minister, you said you were led by evidence. The evidence is GP surgeries in rural Scotland are closing at more than twice the rate of those in many central belt health boards. In NHS Grampian, GPs are damning in their assessment of primary care under this SNP Scottish Government. And here are just some recent direct quotes from GPs to their representative body in NHS Grampian. We had to switch off our phones yesterday for the first time as we have reached our safe limit. We felt we had no option. It feels unmanageable just now. And another said, the current situation cannot continue. Staff are completely exhausted and morale is very low. And somebody else said, another GP said, there has to be an easier way to make a living than this. And I see the Cabinet Secretary talking to you and giving feedback, and I'm glad of that, because we cannot afford to lose more surgeries. Deputy First Minister, GPs and patients across rural communities are watching and listening today.
Can we have a question, please, Ms. White?
What answer can you give them now, because they're at breaking point?
Deputy First Minister.
Can I start by saying that the question that Tess White asks is very important, because, again, I understand in detail the challenges facing our rural GPs. But it's precisely because of the challenges around recruitment that we have invested in the pioneering ScotGem programme. The first cohort is coming through just now. And we also recognise that there are distinct challenges when it comes to rural and island areas, which is reflected in the budget that has been committed, £3 million for the National Centre for Remote and Rural Health and Care, which was launched in October, is being delivered by NHS Education for Scotland. And you'll also know that we incentivise GPs into taking up rural positions through the £10,000 Golden Hello scheme, and also investing £1 million into bursaries for GP. So where there is agreement is on the pressures facing our rural GPs. The point is that we're taking action right now to try and support them as far as possible, because we recognise the importance of our rural GPs.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Tories have presided over the closure of 450 surgeries, over 1,000 pharmacies, a third of the total, longer waiting lists and strikes by junior doctors and nurses, with 40 promised new hospitals unbuilt over the last decade in England. Does the Deputy First Minister agree that the evidence is clear that Scotland's NHS, with all its challenges, is in better shape for both staff and patients under the SNP than it ever would be under the Tories?
Deputy First Minister.
Kenny Gibson is right to talk about the wider context, because the situation facing the Scottish NHS has got to be seen in the wider context of the challenges when it comes to visas, the challenges around austerity, and despite that we're delivering over £19.5 billion of funding for the NHS, health and social care, to give our NHS a real terms uplift and supporting significant investment on the front line. We are committed to the founding principles of the NHS, unlike some other parties in here, and we also want to mitigate against austerity.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer. Deputy First Minister, I've been contacted this week by Preston Pan's group practice, the GP surgery in Preston Pan's East Lothian, with concerns about funding, staffing and patient care. They face a withdrawal of funding of 10% from cuts to the East Lothian Health and Social Care Partnership, as well as increased estate fees. This will have an impact on patients. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister if herself, or indeed the Cabinet Secretary, will meet with me to discuss the concerns raised by this group, the whole of the Lothian Local Medical Committee, and indeed how we can improve the situation across the south of Scotland?
Deputy First Minister.
I have no hesitation in agreeing for the Cabinet Secretary for Health to meet with Martin Whitfield and his constituents.
Question number 6, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. To ask the Deputy First Minister by what date the Scottish Government will decide which of the national park nominations will be taken forward to the next stage.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the deadline for nominations from areas to be considered for designation as a new national park was the 29th of February this year. Nominations have been received from Galloway, Lochaber, Loch Awe, Scottish Borders and Tay Forest, and an appraisal process commenced in March 2024. That appraisal process concluded last week, and the Cabinet Secretary, Mary Goujon, is now considering the outcome of that process and will make recommendations shortly.
Mark Crossgold.
Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer? I live in a national park and I see every day how it hugely benefits businesses, communities and nature. And from speaking to local businesses in the stunning Tay Forest area, it is clear they're looking for certainty about the designation of Scotland's third national park. But the clock is ticking, particularly for the statutory process to complete by 2026. So will Kate Forbes personally ensure that this government leaves a lasting and tangible green legacy for our rural communities by designating at least one new national park ahead of the next Holyrood election?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member will know that I don't quite live in a national park, but I represent one. And I do see the benefits, particularly in and around the Cairngorm National Park area. In terms of process, a decision by Cabinet on next steps will be taken over the summer. And of course, the criteria that has been finalised for evaluating the national parks is quite clear. It's on outstanding national importance, the size, character and coherence of the area, meeting the special needs of the area. It may be that not all the proposals meet the criteria, but that will be a decision that is taken by the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In light of the reports about CMAL being merged into our national ferries body, what assurances can the Deputy First Minister provide that the CMAL jobs will remain in Port Glasgow Town Centre?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, when it comes to our ferry network, we absolutely recognise that not only does it provide a vital lifeline service, but it also employs people in areas that are under pressure. And Stuart McMillan has been a stalwart in representing his area when it comes to jobs that are related to the ferry network. And I'm sure that the Cabinet Secretary for Transport will keep him and others in Parliament informed of any decisions that are made.
Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A parliamentary question I submitted has revealed that the SNP government holds no information on repeat offences for its flagship domestic abuse rehabilitation programme known as the Caledonian System. Deputy First Minister, if the government don't hold information on reoffending rates, how can it possibly judge how successful this programme is?
Deputy First Minister.
When it comes to these initiatives and programmes, they are all fully evaluated, and what's important for us is to make sure that it has the confidence of victims as well, and that is a key consideration when it comes to the data that is held. And I'm sure if the member is keen to understand some of the thinking behind the decisions that have been made, I'm sure that Angela Constance would be more than happy to meet with her.
Paul Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Tuesday, the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice stood where the Deputy First Minister is and delivered the annual update on progress to tackle child poverty. What we know is that those levels have been stagnant for 17 years in Scotland and on many measures have increased. The Cabinet Secretary said our action is making a difference. At the same time as that statement, the Poverty and Equality Commission released its annual scrutiny report, and they said, in relation to this government's actions, and I quote, "Limited progress has been made over the last year. Progress in other areas is slow or not evident at all, and that without immediate and significant action, the Scottish Government will not meet the 2030 targets." The Cabinet Secretary told me that the Government is committed to those targets. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister, does she agree with the Commission's analysis of her Government's action, and will she tell the Chamber, is the Government going to meet those targets?
Deputy First Minister.
This Government is very proud of the fact that tackling child poverty is one of its national missions. We take this seriously. It's one of the top priorities of the First Minister, and the Cabinet Secretary set out the action that we are taking. This action has resulted in just short of 100,000 children who would have been in poverty no longer being in poverty. And the evidence for that is quite clear on an international basis, that the Scottish Child Payment is game-changing. It's the only one of its kind in Europe, and we want to go as far as possible in lifting children out of poverty.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whilst Westminster is trashing the UK economy with Brexit, the SNP Scottish Government is prioritising boosting economic growth. It's welcome to see that the latest Bank of Scotland Business Barometer is showing business optimism in Scotland up by 15% in May to 57%, the joint highest in the UK. Can the Deputy First Minister say any more about the steps that the Scottish Government is taking to make Scotland the best place in the UK to do business?
Deputy First Minister.
That is absolutely our aim and ambition. Scotland is open for business. We are committed to working right across the economy to maximise the huge economic opportunities that lie ahead, and not least the incredible renewables energy sector. We want to ensure that our economy remains one of the best performing parts of the UK, as it is right now, and we will do that by working in partnership with business, industry and trade unions. Scotland's GDP per capita has grown faster than the UK's since 2007, and a record number of foreign direct investment projects were secured in Scotland in 2022, maintaining our position as the top performing area of the UK outside of London for the 8th year running.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On the 28th of May 2020, Dwayne McClay and Gary Mackay were both killed, and Kimberly Nicholson was violently stabbed in Inverness. The person who carried out the attack had had contact with Police Scotland, NHS Highland, the Highland Council and the Home Office, all of whom have appeared to have followed their own procedures without liaising with each other. Deputy First Minister, I know we can't turn the clock back, but would you be agreeable to meeting with me and the families to try and find ways to ensure information is shared between public bodies regarding vulnerable individuals so that no similar event can occur again?
Deputy First Minister.
I think that the member makes an important point about engaging with the families, and also an important point of constantly looking at ways that public bodies can work together. And so I'm sure that without agreeing on Angela Constance's behalf to more meetings than I've agreed to, I think she'd be more than happy to meet with Edward Mountain and the families.
Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Only 38% of type 1 diabetics in NHS Lothian have access to a flash glucose monitor, compared to 51.8% across Scotland. The divide is even more stark with children, where only a quarter of paediatric patients in NHS Lothian have access to an FGM, compared with 35.5% across Scotland. This technology is life-changing for those who receive it, and type 1s in the Lothians are getting short-changed. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister what her government is doing to increase access to flash glucose monitors across the Lothians?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member is right to say that this treatment can be transformational. And the Cabinet Secretary for Health has announced £8.8 million to support the work we're doing around diabetes, and has made the commitment that all children with type 1 will get the support that they need.
Thank you. Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I associate the Scottish Greens with colleagues' comments in commemoration of those who made the ultimate sacrifice in Normandy 80 years ago to liberate Europe from fascism? We will remember them. Following the tragic death of a cyclist in March and multiple other serious incidents along the Drimmen and Dundalk Road corridor in Bearsden, a community campaign, Safe Streets Bearsden, has formed to call on East Martinshire Council and other public bodies to take urgent action to protect pedestrians and cyclists. The campaign's highlighted that a number of schools